Bombay years ago, when I joined the bar in November 1950, he was already a judge of the Federal Court and then of the Supreme Court, and very active. We heard of him in our chambers in a different light. You see, you must realize that it was the most successful chamber, Sir Jamsetji Kanga's chamber in Bombay. It was less than 1/5 of this entire hall. And there were 4 seniors who had tables and chairs opposite. There were 3 junior seniors who had only 1 chair each. And the rest of us, including Jeevan Reddy, Justice Jeevan Reddy, myself, a lot of others, we had only standing room. There were no chairs to sit on. This was the chamber of Sir Jamsetji Kanga, but it was one of the most successful chambers in Bombay. We had a lawyer there who was a great friend of ours, Lowington's also. And almost immediately after I joined Sir Jamsetji's chamber in 1951, there were rumors that Mr. Gamadia, who had only standing room in the chamber, that was his seniority, would be going to Delhi in a case which representing some army colonel who was a friend of his. Now that army colonel was the respondent in a special leave petition which was filed by the Union of India. And the Union of India was represented by none other than Motilal Sethuvat. And when the advocate on record of this colonel came to know that this was going to be a one-horse race because Motilal would be there opposing this gentleman from Sir Kanga's chamber, he immediately wired and told him that you must brief a counsel from Delhi, a known counsel, because otherwise there will be no match. But of course that fellow was an army type, and he said, I don't know who you talk about this Setalwal, whoever this fellow is, but we will be very comfortable with our Mr. Gamadia. And Mr. Gamadia therefore represented him. Well, Mr. Gamadia went to Delhi, and sure enough, Setalwat got up for his SLP. He was a man of very few words. I had seen him, I had heard him, I knew him. He was an outstanding advocate of our time, one of the greatest. And he said something. Mahajan was presiding. Is this Mahajan? There are too many Mahajans here. And Mahajan was presiding. And Setalwat spoke for 4 or 5 minutes, that's about all. And the court was against him. So Setalwat sat down. He didn't go persisting like today's counsel, they go on arguing and counting to justice. That sort of advocacy was not known in our time, in those days. And up popped Gamadia. So Mahajan said brusquely, we don't wish to hear you. He said, what, my lord? You don't wish to hear me? I come from Bombay, all the way from Bombay, and I will be heard. Now that was a sunny day for Mahajan because he was otherwise extraordinarily brusque with everybody. But apparently he thought that here's this upstart from Bombay who says he's come from Bombay. Well, let's hear him. So he wanted to humor him. So he said, all right, we'll hear you. So Gamadia got up. And he had a very polished argument of 4 minutes or 5 minutes. And of course he sat down and the SLP was dismissed. They came back to Bombay, triumphant. He had won over India's finest advocate and India's super judge. This man was a super judge. That's what I want to tell you. There are very few. We were 240 odd judges of the Supreme Court, but very few super judges. And he was one of the first super judge. He was a man with great talent, And one important thing which you must all remember, he was a great fellow for personal liberty. Every single case that you hear on preventive detention or read about from 1950 onwards, whether Mahajan was in the majority or Mahajan was in dissent, he always said release the detainee. Because his view was preventive detention in peacetime is evil. He said so in Gopalan's case. He was in a minority there. And Gopalan's case only got reversed, a majority judgment after 20 odd years. There was another case which came up, and that's all I'll tell you. And it concerned a very senior advocate, much senior than Gamadia, Sir Nariman, an engineer who was Advocate General of India before independence. And very shortly after independence, sometime in 52 or 53, there was a case from Nagpur, Manikji Dadabhai coalfields, and this came up. The record was about 1,000 pages, and the Gagrat and Company, Rustamji Gagrat was the solicitor, and they had planned for a 4-week hearing before a bench, which was presided over by Mahajan. And sure enough, the very first day when Sir Nariman got up, and he had this habit of clearing his throat. So Mahajan said, yes, Sir Nariman, what do you want to say? So he explained something. He heard him for about half an hour. He said, now come to page 432. So that, volumes and volumes. So he came to 430. What is your answer to page 432? Well, again he cleared his throat and he went on. He couldn't give a reply. Positive. And the whole appeal, which was supposed to take 4 weeks, finished within 2 hours. And they all came back, crestfallen, back to Bombay. And he was very brusque. That was his. And he, in fact, writes in his autobiography, if you read it, that he tried to imitate a colleague of his. He doesn't mention who the colleague was, who always told him, you just, when you're fed up with the council arguing, just look out of the window, close your eyes, and keep listening to him until he exhausts himself. And when he exhausts himself, then you very sweetly smile and say, dismiss. That's what he said. But he said, unfortunately, I've never been able to achieve this. That's one of my great regrets. Anyway, so that's all that we heard about Mahajan, except you must also remember, he was a great property man, small property. Because the Sholapur spinning weaving case in 1954 was one of the most brilliant judgments on private property. Of course, after that, there's been no private property. It's been deleted from the fundamental rights chapter, which to my mind is a great pity, because private property is the very basis of all freedoms, in my view. But that's a separate thing. And this is a great judge. You are listening. You will be reading about a man who was an outstanding judge of his time, a man to be emulated by people who today aspire to be judges or are judges of the highest court. That's all, ladies and gentlemen. So, one last thing. And I say this in the presence of 2 judges of the Supreme Court today. He says, Three, sorry. 3 judges of the Supreme Court today. Yeah. And he writes there, right at the end, is that whenever we differ, we always discuss it amongst ourselves. And we were one happy family. My only prayer is that the Supreme Court of India today becomes one happy family in the very near
Mr. Fali, Nariman, it was one very happy family, because with all the summer vacations that we had, all the judges of the Supreme Court, they all stayed at our houses in Dharamsala, and we were a very happy family. We, at all the generations knew, the younger generations knew each other, and those friendships, those relationships continued till today. So it was a reality. Now I would request Justice Nariman to say a few words. I would just briefly, you all know him, but I would just like to say something very briefly about him. In 2014, when the invitation came for the Supreme Court, as you know, he had a roaring practice, titanic practice. So his well-wishers